It is imperative that we do a lesson presentation on this subject because the larger majority of folk in the black church live and go about their lives as if Satan doesn't exist. And I'm not just talking about the usual ways most black Christians talk about how the quote unquote devil attacks them in their finances, their homes, their children, etc. And even in these cases, it may be an attack of Satan. But I'm talking about how most black folk are just plain ignorant about who Satan is, the instruments he uses to attack us, and just the overall ignorance of Satan's person, work, and in general, how he uses uh, his demonic and human allies. We know all this to be true because many of our people, specifically Negroes or black folk that have no idea of the great and magnificent heritage they possess as the people of the book, are still caught up with celebrating known pagan holidays. And specifically, we are dealing with the pagan holiday of Halloween. Why are we as a people dressing up our kids in these ridiculous costumes as witches, warlocks, clowns, Dracula, the devil, firemen, policemen, stars, and celebrities? And even more, allow them to trick or treat, and also taking them to harvest festivals with hay rides, pumpkins, and gourds. So now we are back to the same injunction the prophet Hosea spoke of regarding the children of Israel. We are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. So we feel compelled to do some teaching on the most wickedest day of the year and what it represents. That day being Halloween. On the Illuminati's calendar of most sacred night for human sacrifice is a day called Samhain. I used to pronounce this word Samhain, but I just found out that the correct pronunciation of the word is Samhain. It is an extraordinarily wicked day. Hence the reason why so many people come up missing on this particular day. Human sacrifice. This day in modern times, at least what we would call modern times, Samhain has been recast as Halloween. But in ancient times, it wasn't called Halloween. It was called Samhain. Samhain is the Celtic lord of the dead. He is represented as the stag god, which turns out to be none other than Nimrod. Here we have a pictorial or a picture of the god Samhain, who was also known as Chunamos. Samhain was celebrated from October 29th to the 31st of October. It was celebrated in 3 days. The day was first introduced by the Celtic people. Samhain marked the Celtic New Year, the end of summer and the end of the harvest season. It also signaled the beginning of winter, which they associated with death. Now, on this day, the Celts believed the veil between the living and the dead was especially thin. The Celtic people came into the region of the British Isles around 9 BC and held sway in that region till about 900 BC. They were a warrior clan of people who had a priestly class called the Druids. The word Druid means men of oak. The oak tree is sacred to the Illuminati. The 40-foot owl at the Bohemian Grove is made out of solid oak. The Druids held the authority over the Celtic tribe. They read the entrails of animals to predict the future, to determine good or bad omen, whether people could get married, and whether there would be a good harvest or a bad harvest. The Druids controlled the life of the people. Stonehenge is a megalithic site that is on what is called a ley line. Ley lines are straight alignments drawn between various historic structures and prominent landmarks. The idea was developed in early 20th century Europe, with ley line believers arguing that these alignments were recognized by ancient societies that deliberately erected structures along them. Baalbek of Lebanon is on a ley line. Specific ancient burial mounds in the United States are on ley lines. The Georgia Guidestones, interestingly enough, are on ley lines. And Sacsayhuaman of Cusco, Peru, the site of the ancient Inca tribes and megalithic sites, are also on ley lines. Now, these sites that lay on ley lines are connected to all the sites that figure into the occult, secret societies, and pagan ritual sites. But of course, your question would be, what does all this have to do with Halloween? Well, Stonehenge, which lays on a ley line, was one of the major sites the Druids performed their rituals and human sacrifices. All these sites that lay on ley lines were places of wickedness and evil. But the most famous site that lays on a ley line is Mount Hermon, the mount that the 200 watcher angels descended upon before the flood. This mount also lays on the 33rd degree parallel, specifically the 33rd.3 degrees, which figures prominently by association with the 33rd degree in Masonry. The importance of this mount is crucial because this is the mount where these watcher angels conspired to pollute and destroy God's creation. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. This is Genesis, the 6th chapter, verse 1 through 3. The book of Enoch, 6th chapter, verse 1 to 8. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and begat us children. And Simyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin.
And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of the leaders: Simyaza, their leader, Irakabah, Ramiel, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Danel, Ezekiel, Barakiel, Asaziel, Amarias, Baturel, Ananel, Zekiel, Samsapiel, Setriel, Turel, Jonjael, Seriel. These are their chiefs of tens.
So chiefly, Samhain and Stonehenge figures prominently with the trappings of Halloween as we know it today. We will continue to deal with this extraordinarily wicked day, so stay tuned.
All right, we'll take up the rest of this study in our next slide presentation. Shalom.